Welcome back to another episode of Prac Plays. Today we'll be doing another tutorial video, where I'll be showing you how I paint my World War II British infantry using a mix of contrast and regular paints. As usual, my goal here is not to produce a competition level figure, but to get a good looking figure for the tabletop in a short amount of time. You'll also notice that I use two brands of contrast paints, regular contrast paints from Games Workshop or Citadel, and speed paints from the Army Painter. This mix resulted from me buying different paints from both sets to determine which I liked best. Spoiler alert, I liked them both. But both companies make nearly identical colors. They just give them different names. So if you tend to use a different set of paints than I use, you should be able to find basically the same colors that I'm using in this video. Getting started, you'll notice that I got some of the initial steps out of the way off camera. The first thing I did was apply a Wraithbone primer from Games Workshop, although any white primer or off-white or gray primer will work. I then do a base layer of the uniform using snakebite leather. For the webbing, I then paint a mix of 3 parts malignant green and 1 part camo cloak, which I find gives that kind of off-green color that you see on a lot of British webbing. I next use Grim Black to paint the boots, the Sten gun, parts of the radio, and any other parts of the model that are black. So next is time for the skin. But here I don't use a contrast or a speed paint because I find that their flesh tones are a little unnatural. Instead, I use just a traditional skin tone. Here I'm using one from Andrea Color, which is called light skin tone, for the hands and the face. After that dries, I add a basic flesh wash that you can purchase from a number of different companies to all parts of the skin that we just painted. Next comes a dark wood for the helmet strap, and if this was a figure with a rifle or a shovel, I would use dark wood for those parts as well. For the bits of cloth on the helmet that were used as camouflage, I use a mix of a Dark Angel's green and a skeleton horde for the different strips of cloth, applying it randomly. I also use the skeleton horde for any straps for the weapons, so for here, the Sten gun. With that, the basic figure is complete, and so now I paint the base green using a camo cloak, and I paint the rim black, just using a black primer or a typical regular black paint. For some final details, I want to add a division patch to this figure. Now I've been trying to model the 15th Scottish Division, and typically when I add some small detail like a division patch to a figure, especially a 20mm or a 1/72nd scale figure, I want to use a waterslide decal, because painting details like a division patch on something this small can be very difficult to do. But I haven't been able to find a 15th Scottish Division waterslide decal patch in this scale, so we're going to have to paint one. I first start with a bright yellow paint to make the background of the division patch, which is simply a little circle. So for this, I add just a tiny dot of yellow to each shoulder. Then, using a red paint, I'm going to try my best to make a small Scottish lion. Now, if this was a 28mm figure, I might be able to paint something actually looking like a lion. But on a 20mm figure, you just need to get something close to it. So the basic shape of the lion on the 15th Scottish patch resembles 2 red X's, and so that's what I paint here. I then add a red stripe to signify above the patch that this figure is in the infantry. And with that, we're done. Again, I don't think this is going to win any painting competitions, but I think the final figure looks great for the amount of time it takes to paint it. In fact, following these steps, I was able to paint my entire British force, which is about a platoon and a half to 2 platoons of figures, in a couple of weeks, spending about an hour or 2 every other day on the models. But let me know what you think. Did you find this video helpful? Would you like any other tutorials? Or would you have painted the models differently than I did? Regardless, we hope to see you in the next video.